When Claire Mitchell moved to Davenport, Iowa, she told people it was for the quiet. After 12 years in Chicago's ER system, the traffic noise, sirens, and the endless churn of faces had worn her thin. Davenport felt different, river air drifting in from the Mississippi, modest brick houses, grocery stores that closed before midnight. The kind of place where neighbors waved even if they didn't know your name. She rented a narrow 2-bedroom duplex on West 13th Street. The carpet smelled faintly of old detergent and dust. The furnace kicked on with a metallic groan. It was enough. 3 days after unpacking, she started her new job at Mercy General Hospital. The building dated back to the 1960s. Long corridors, beige linoleum floors buffed to a dull shine, fluorescent lighting that hummed almost imperceptibly. During orientation, the HR manager mentioned staffing shortages with a rehearsed smile. "We're grateful you're willing to take nights." Claire didn't mind nights. Nights were predictable, slower, cleaner. Fewer administrators hovering. Her shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on the 3rd floor, a mixed medical surgical unit. 20 rooms, usually quiet after 2 a.m. except for the steady beep of monitors and the rolling squeak of medication carts. The first 2 nights were uneventful. She learned the layout: supply closet near the nurses' station, crash cart at the far end, stairwell exit beside room 317. The smell of antiseptic clung to her scrubs even after she got home. It started on the 3rd night. At 2:17 a.m., she was charting vitals when she heard a call light chime. Room 312. She glanced at the board. 312 was empty. The patient had been discharged that afternoon. Environmental services hadn't even prepped it yet. Claire frowned and walked down the hall. The corridor felt longer than usual, fluorescent lights casting pale shadows along the walls. The call light above 312's door blinked red. She opened it. The room was dark except for the hallway spill of light. Bed neatly made, no equipment connected, the monitor unplugged, but the bathroom light was on. "Hello?" she called gently, stepping inside. No answer. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar. The light flickered once, then steadied. She pushed it open. Empty. Tile floor dry. Sink off. The air smelled faintly metallic. Not blood, exactly. More like old pipes. Claire stood there a moment longer than necessary, then turned off the light. When she stepped back into the hallway, the call light stopped blinking. She didn't mention it. Electrical glitches happened. The next night, around 3 a.m., she was checking on Mr. Halverson in 318 when she heard slow footsteps in the corridor outside. Not hurried, not the rubber-soled rhythm of nurses. Heavier, dragging slightly. She assumed it was Sam from security. He made rounds every hour. After finishing with the patient, she stepped out. The hallway was empty. The nurse's station monitor showed no one on camera. She picked up the desk phone and dialed security. "Sam, you just passed 3rd floor?" A pause. "No, ma'am, I'm down in radiology. Why?" She almost said never mind. "Thought I heard someone." "Maintenance, maybe?" "There's no maintenance scheduled tonight." Another pause. "Want me to come up?" She hesitated. "No, it's fine." It wasn't fine. At 4:05 a.m., she went to restock IV kits from the supply closet near 317. As she reached for the handle, she heard breathing. Soft, close, not from inside the closet, behind her. She turned quickly. The hallway was empty again. Monitors beeped steadily in distant rooms. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. She stood still, listening. Nothing. Her heart was racing harder than it should have been. She opened the closet. The smell of plastic packaging and disinfectant hit her face. Everything in order. As she stepped out, she noticed something she hadn't before. Room 317. The door was cracked open. She was certain she had closed it earlier. The patient in 317, Mrs. Donnelly, was a light sleeper. Claire always made sure the door was pulled nearly shut to keep hallway noise down. She walked toward it slowly. "Mrs. Donnelly?" she called softly. No response. She pushed the door open wider. The patient was asleep, oxygen cannula in place. Monitor reading stable vitals. But the window, The third-floor window overlooking the dark parking lot was open, just an inch, enough for cold November air to slip inside. Claire felt it brush her face. That was impossible. The hospital windows didn't open. She walked closer. The frame showed no damage, no latch undone, yet she could see the faint movement of the blinds shifting inward, stirred by wind. She reached out. The window was solid glass, completely sealed, no gap, no opening, but the blinds continued to move gently. She stepped back, pulse pounding in her ears. The monitor beside Mrs. Donnelly beeped faster for a moment, then stabilized again. Claire adjusted the blinds, forcing them still. She didn't tell anyone. By the 6th shift, sleep deprivation wasn't the problem. It was anticipation. At 2 a.m., she found room 312's bed slightly indented in the center, as if someone had sat there. The sheets were no longer tight and flat. Environmental Services insisted they hadn't touched it. At 3:30 a.m., she heard whispering from the stairwell door beside 317. 2 voices, too low to distinguish words. When she pushed the heavy metal door open, the stairwell was empty from top to bottom. Concrete walls, faint echo, no movement. But on the second landing, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. A hospital wristband, white plastic, printed with faded ink. The name was partially smudged, but she could make out the room number clearly, 312. Claire stared at it for a long time. Room 312 had been empty since she started. She checked admissions records later. No current patient assigned. She scrolled further back. There had been one, 3 weeks ago. Cardiac arrest, pronounced at 2:19 a.m. in room 312. Claire's shift always seemed to grow colder after 2 a.m., and every night, without fail, at exactly 2:17, the call light blinked on. Waiting. By the 9th night, Claire stopped telling herself it was coincidence. 2:17 a.m. came with the precision of a scheduled medication. No variation, no delay. The call light in room 312 blinked red, steady, patient, like something waiting to be acknowledged. On Monday, she decided to document it. Hospitals ran on documentation. If it wasn't charted, it didn't happen. At 2:16, she stood at the nurse's station, arms folded, eyes fixed on the dark hallway. Sam from security sat across from her, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup. "You look like you're expecting a code," he said. "Just watch," she replied. The red light flicked on. Sam frowned. "That room's empty, right?" "Has been." He stood. "Probably wiring." They walked down together. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the floor. Not dramatically, but enough that Claire's breath felt sharper in her chest. Sam opened the door first. The bed was no longer neatly made. The blanket lay folded at the foot, precise, deliberate. The top sheet was pulled back halfway, as if inviting someone in. "That wasn't like this," Claire said. Sam stepped inside, checking the bathroom. No signs of entry. He pressed the call button beside the bed. It illuminated instantly. "See? System's working." Claire moved closer to the headboard. There was a dent in the pillow. Fresh. Sam noticed it too, but didn't comment. "Maintenance can check it tomorrow," he said lightly. "Old building." After he left, Claire stayed behind. The air carried that same faint metallic smell. Not blood, not rust, just something old. She leaned down and touched the mattress. It was warm. Her hand froze. Not warm from the building's heat. Warm the way fabric holds body temperature after someone stands up. Claire pulled her hand back slowly. At 2:19 a.m., the monitor in the hallway outside room 312 beeped sharply. A flatline tone. She spun around. The monitor wasn't connected to anything. It hadn't been powered on all week. Yet the flatline sound rang once, loud and unmistakable. Then silence. The next morning, she filed an incident report. She kept it clinical. Unexplained call light activation in unoccupied room, possible electrical malfunction, recommend inspection. By the time she arrived for her next shift, the charge nurse, Linda, called her into the break room. Linda was in her late 50s, efficient, practical, the kind of nurse who didn't indulge rumors. "You filed something about 312, Linda said, holding the printed report. "Yes." Linda studied her face carefully. Maintenance checked it. No wiring issues. The system log doesn't show any activation at 2:17. Claire's stomach tightened. I saw it. Security saw it. I spoke with Sam, Linda replied evenly. He said the bed looked disturbed, but he also said the camera footage doesn't show anyone entering the room. Claire blinked. There are cameras in that hallway. Yes. And? Linda hesitated. The footage between 2:10 and 2:30 was corrupted. Corrupted how? Static. That word lingered. Static. Hospitals didn't use that word. They used data error or signal loss. Claire left the break room unsettled but determined to remain rational. Equipment malfunctioned. Digital systems glitched. Old buildings shifted. That night, at 1:58 a.m., before the usual time, she heard something new. A voice. Faint. From inside room 312. She was alone at the nurse's station. It wasn't whispering this time. It sounded like someone trying to speak through a dry throat. Help. Claire's pulse began hammering before she consciously processed the word. She stood slowly and walked down the hall. The door to 312 was closed. The call light had not yet activated. She placed her hand on the handle. It vibrated. Not visibly, not enough to see, but she felt a subtle tremor in the metal, like something tapping against it from the other side. Her mouth went dry. Hello? Hello, she called. Silence. At exactly 2:17, the call light blinked on. She pushed the door open. The room was dark except for the glow of the hallway behind her. The bed was empty, but the bathroom door was shut. That was new. It had always been slightly open before. The metallic smell was stronger now. Claire stepped inside and reached for the bathroom knob. It was cold, ice cold. She turned it slowly. The bathroom light flicked on automatically. The mirror above the sink was fogged. Thick condensation coated the glass. There was no shower running, no hot water, just heavy, damp fog. Her breathing quickened. On the mirror, through the condensation, letters had been traced by a finger. Not neatly, jagged, trembling. Stay. Claire stared at it, her mind scrambling for logic. Someone was playing a prank. Someone had access. Someone had to. She wiped the mirror with her sleeve. The words smeared but didn't fully disappear. Underneath, faint indentations in the glass remained, as if the letters had been pressed hard. Behind her, from the main room, came the unmistakable sound of a bed creaking under weight. Slow, measured, as if someone had just sat down. Claire didn't turn around immediately. Her hands gripped the sink. The creaking stopped. She forced herself to step backward into the doorway. The bed was still. Blanket folded neatly again at the foot, but the pillow was indented, deeper than before. And this time, there was a second dent beside it, as if someone had leaned in close. At 2:19 a.m., the flatline tone echoed once more. Longer. Claire stumbled back into the hallway. The overhead lights flickered for a brief second, then stabilized. When she looked up toward the nurse's station, she saw something that made her chest tighten. Every monitor screen along the desk displayed the same frozen frame of hallway footage. The timestamp read 2:19 a.m., and in the image, standing in front of room 312, was Claire, but not as she was now. The figure on the screen stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly downward, facing the door, not moving, even though Claire herself was halfway down the corridor staring at the screens. Slowly, on the monitor, the other Claire lifted her head and looked directly into the camera. The security footage was gone by morning. Linda called it a temporary server anomaly. It blamed an overnight update. Sam insisted the cameras had never shown anything unusual, but Claire knew what she had seen. The still frame of herself standing outside room 312 at 2:09 a.m., head tilted, unmoving, watching. She stopped arguing about it. The 10th shift began like the others. Fluorescent hum, antiseptic air, half-lit hallways stretching into shadow. She parked in the employee lot beneath a flickering sodium lamp. November wind scraped dry leaves along the pavement. Inside, the hospital smelled faintly of overbrewed coffee and disinfectant wipes. At 1:45 a.m., she reviewed the patient board. Only 12 occupied rooms tonight. 312 remained officially unassigned. At 2:05 a.m., Mr. Halverson in 318 complained of a sudden chill. "It's freezing in here," he said, teeth chattering slightly. The thermostat read 72 degrees. Claire checked the vent. Warm air flowed steadily, yet her own arms prickled with goosebumps. At 2:12 a.m., the overhead lights dimmed for a fraction of a second. Not a full flicker, just enough to make everyone glance up. Linda muttered something about the power grid. At 2:16 a.m., Claire stood at the nurse's station again. She hadn't told anyone she was waiting. She just didn't want to be alone when it happened. 2:17. The red call light blinked on. No one reacted this time except her. Linda didn't look up. Claire felt her stomach sink. "Did you see that?" she asked quietly. "See what?" Linda replied without raising her eyes from the chart. The light was still flashing. Claire walked down the corridor alone. The air grew colder with each step. Not dramatically, just subtly wrong, like stepping into a basement. Room 312's door was open. She hadn't touched it. Inside, the bed was no longer empty. Someone was lying beneath the sheet. Still, face obscured. The shape was unmistakably human. Claire's breathing became shallow. She stepped inside slowly. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The figure did not move. The sheet rose slightly at the chest, or maybe that was her imagination. Her mind raced for explanations. A patient moved without updating the board. A mistake in assignment. A prank. She approached the bed. The room smelled stronger now. Metallic, sterile, with something faintly sweet underneath. She reached for the sheet. Her hand hovered inches above it. The call light turned off. Behind her, the bathroom door clicked shut. Claire spun around. It had been open. The mirror light inside flicked on by itself. She heard water running, a thin stream hitting porcelain. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Slowly, she turned back to the bed. The sheet was flat. No body, the mattress empty. She staggered back, her heel catching on the edge of the IV stand. At 2:19 a.m., the flatline tone screamed, not from a hallway monitor this time, but from inside the room. The unplugged cardiac monitor beside the bed flashed to life, green waveform, then a straight line, then waveform again, as if it were detecting a heartbeat that wasn't there. Claire backed toward the door. In the reflection of the darkened TV screen mounted across from the bed, she saw it. Someone standing behind her. Close. Too close. She did not feel breath, did not feel touch, but the reflection showed a figure inches from her back, head tilted slightly downward, mirroring the posture from the security footage. She turned quickly. The room was empty. The bathroom light shut off. The monitor screen went black. The hallway outside seemed impossibly long now, stretching into dimness. Claire stepped into it. No one was at the nurse's station. The desk lights were on, charts open, coffee cups steaming faintly. But no Linda, no patients calling. Silence. Thick, unnatural silence. She walked toward the station slowly. Her shoes made no sound on the linoleum. As she passed the wall clock, she looked up. 2:19 a.m. The second hand wasn't moving. She picked up the desk phone. Dead line. She tried her cell. No signal. The air felt heavy, pressurized. From the far end of the hallway, near the stairwell beside 317, she heard footsteps, dragging, measured, approaching. Not hurried. Claire's throat tightened. "Hello?" she called. The footsteps continued, closer, but no shape appeared, just the sound. Then breathing. Soft. Right behind her ear. She didn't turn this time. Her shoulders stiffened. In front of her, the dark screen of the nurse's station monitor flickered on. Security footage. Timestamp 2:19 a.m. The image showed room 312. The door open. Inside the room, someone stood near the bed. A woman, wearing Claire's navy scrubs, hair pulled back the same way. She watched as the figure on the screen slowly lay down on the hospital bed, pulled the sheet over her chest, folded her hands. The monitor beside the bed flatlined. Back in the hallway, Claire felt something cold wrap around her wrist. Not tight, just enough to guide. The stairwell door beside 317 creaked open. The breathing stopped. The clock on the wall ticked forward. 2:20 a.m. Morning shift found the third floor quiet. Linda was at the nurse's station, flipping through charts, confused. "Claire?" she called. No answer. Her coffee sat untouched beside the keyboard. Her badge lay on the counter. Security reviewed footage. Between 2:10 and 2:30 a.m., every camera on the third floor showed static. Maintenance found nothing wrong with room 312. The bed was neatly made, the bathroom dry, the mirror clean. But in the system archive logs, buried under corrupted data, IT recovered one anomaly. At 2:09 a.m., room 3112 registered a patient admission, named Claire Mitchell. Status, deceased. Time of death, 2:19 a.m. No body was ever found. When Marissa Caldwell accepted the temporary assistant position at Northwood Regional Hospital in Cedar Vale, Ohio, she told herself it was just a stopgap. 6 weeks, maybe 8. Enough to cover rent on her one-bedroom apartment off Briar Street and keep her car from being repossessed. Northwood sat on the edge of town near a stretch of highway lined with gas stations and fast food chains. During the day, it looked ordinary. Brick facade, tinted windows, a flag snapping in the wind. At night, though, the building seemed to withdraw into itself. The upper floors went dark one by one, leaving only the emergency entrance glowing under fluorescent canopy lights. Marissa's role was basic: patient transport, chart deliveries, supply restocking, whatever the nursing supervisors needed. She had previous experience as a physical therapy aide, so the hospital hired her quickly. On her third day, the staffing coordinator, a tired man named Greg Harlow, called her into his office. "We're short nights for a while," he said, scrolling through a schedule on his monitor. "Just temporary. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Differential pay, less traffic, quieter." "How quiet?" Marissa asked. Greg smiled thinly. "Hospitals are never quiet, but you'll manage." Her first night shift began at 7 p.m. The lobby felt unfamiliar without families and volunteers moving through it. The gift shop gate was pulled down. The coffee kiosk closed. The air carried a faint antiseptic smell layered over something older, like carpet cleaner that never fully dried. By midnight, the corridors had thinned out. Machines hummed in patient rooms. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. Overhead lights were dimmed to half strength in most hallways to support circadian cycles, as one nurse explained. Marissa pushed a linen cart from the elevator toward the surgical wing. The wheels squeaked faintly. The polished floor reflected the ceiling lights in long, pale streaks. She noticed it then. Footsteps behind her. Soft, measured, not hurried. She slowed. The footsteps slowed. She stopped. They stopped. Marissa turned around. The corridor was empty. She waited, listening. Somewhere far off, a call bell chimed. A nurse's voice murmured. The ventilation system exhaled steadily from the ceiling vents. She told herself it was acoustics. Hospitals carried sound in strange ways. Near 1:30 a.m., she delivered a stack of updated charts to the ICU desk. The charge nurse on duty, Danielle Reyes, barely looked up. "Welcome to the graveyard," Danielle said dryly. "If you hear weird stuff, it's usually plumbing." "Usually?" Marissa asked. Danielle shrugged. "Old building." On her way back to the service elevator, Marissa passed a row of family waiting rooms. Most were dark, blinds partially drawn. One room at the end of the hall still had its lights on. She slowed. Inside, someone was sitting in one of the vinyl chairs. A woman, maybe late 60s. Gray hair pulled back. Hospital visitor badge clipped to her sweater. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't looking at a phone, wasn't reading, just sitting. Marissa hesitated, then knocked lightly on the open door frame. "Ma'am, visiting hours ended at 9. Are you waiting on someone?" The woman did not respond. Marissa stepped closer. The air inside the waiting room felt noticeably cooler than the hallway. "Ma'am?" The woman slowly turned her head. Her eyes were open, unfocused, like she was looking through Marissa instead of at her. "I'm still waiting," the woman said quietly. "For who?" Marissa asked. The woman's mouth moved again, but no sound came out. A loud overhead page crackled from the corridor, making Marissa flinch. "Code blue, room 214. Code blue, room 214. When she looked back into the waiting room, the chair was empty. Marissa stared at it for several seconds. The vinyl cushion still bore the faint impression of someone having sat there. She stepped inside. No one. The blinds were still. The door hadn't closed. There was nowhere to hide. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Room 214 was 2 floors up. Later, around 3:10 a.m., while restocking supply cabinets near the cardiology wing, Marissa overheard 2 nurses speaking in hushed tones. "Family already notified?" one asked. "Yeah," the other replied. "Husband's on his way." "What about the mother?" A pause. "She passed years ago." Marissa felt a chill travel across her shoulders. She checked the patient census board when no one was looking. Room 214. Male patient. Late 40s. Cardiac arrest. Time of death 1:34 a.m. The same time the woman in the waiting room had turned her head. At 4 a.m., the hospital seemed to enter a different state. Not quieter, exactly, just stretched thinner. Shadows pooled in corners. Automatic doors opened slower. The overhead lights flickered faintly near the radiology department. Marissa walked alone down the connecting corridor that led to the older wing of the hospital, sections rarely used except for overflow. Halfway down, she heard the footsteps again, behind her, measured, consistent, closer this time. She did not turn immediately. She let them continue for 3 steps, 4, 5. Then she stopped. The footsteps took one more step after she had already frozen, as if whoever or whatever was behind her hadn't realized she'd stopped. The sound corrected itself instantly. Silence. Marissa turned. The hallway was empty, but the motion sensor lights above her flickered on in sequence farther down the corridor. One, then the next, as though someone unseen was walking toward her through the dark. By the end of her 4th night shift, Marissa Caldwell had started keeping track of the time whenever something felt off. Not writing it down, just memorizing it. 2:12 a.m. The first flicker in the older wing. 1:34 a.m., the code blue in room 214. 3:47 a.m., the moment the footsteps seemed to misstep behind her. She told herself there had to be overlap. Patterns created by exhaustion. Night shifts warped perception. Danielle had said as much while pouring stale coffee into a paper cup. "Your brain fills in gaps when it's tired," Danielle explained, "especially at this hour." Marissa nodded, but she wasn't convinced. On Friday night, Greg from staffing caught her near the time clock. "ICU's light tonight," he said. "Can you help with chart transfers in the lower level? Old record storage." "The basement?" she asked. He gave a small shrug. "Technically, yes. It's climate controlled. You'll be fine." The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. The lower level opened into a corridor with painted cinder block walls and older fluorescent fixtures that buzzed faintly. The air smelled different down there, less antiseptic, more like dust and cardboard. The records room was a maze of metal shelving units stacked with boxed files, patient histories going back decades, handwritten notes, yellowing discharge summaries. Marissa rolled a cart between the rows, scanning labels under the pale light. That was when she heard it again. Footsteps, not echoing like before, closer to the ground, slower. They didn't match her pace. She stopped pushing the cart. The wheels squeaked once, then went still. The footsteps continued for 2 more beats after she had stopped. Then they halted abruptly. She turned into the adjacent aisle. Empty. Just shelves and boxes. The fluorescent light above her flickered once, then steadied. "Hello?" she called softly, feeling foolish the moment the word left her mouth. No answer. She finished the transfer quickly and headed back toward the elevator. As she rounded the last row of shelving, she caught sight of something at the far end of the corridor. A woman standing near the exit sign, gray hair pulled back, hospital visitor badge clipped to her sweater. The same woman from the waiting room. Marissa froze. The woman wasn't facing her this time. She stood at a slight angle, head tilted toward the wall, as if listening to something inside it. "Ma'am," Marissa said carefully, "this area isn't open to visitors." The woman's shoulders moved faintly. Breathing. Slow. Deliberate. Marissa took one step forward. The overhead lights flickered in sequence, starting behind her and moving forward down the corridor. One by one, as though something unseen was passing between the fixtures. The woman at the end of the hall did not react. "Security?" Marissa called, louder now, though her voice felt thin in the concrete space. The woman turned her head halfway. Her eyes were open, unfocused. "I'm still waiting," she said, the exact same tone. The exact same words. "For who?" Marissa whispered. This time the woman answered, "For him to wake up." The exit sign above her flickered. When it steadied again, the corridor was empty. Marissa stood there long enough to feel the hum of the lights in her teeth. Back upstairs, she went straight to Danielle. "There was a woman downstairs," she said. "Gray hair, visitor badge. She was in the waiting room earlier this week. You told me the patient's mother was dead." And Danielle stared at her for a moment, then turned to the computer. "What patient?" "Room 214, the cardiac arrest." Danielle's expression shifted slightly. "That was moved to 312 after stabilization," she said. "He didn't die." Marissa felt the floor tilt under her feet. "I heard the code blue. I saw the census board." Danielle frowned and pulled up the chart. Room 214 showed no time of death. No cardiac arrest logged at 1:34 a.m. that night. The patient in 214 that evening had been a post-op appendectomy, discharged the next day. "That's not possible," Marissa said quietly. Danielle's voice softened. "You need sleep." At 3:52 a.m., Marissa walked alone toward the older wing again. She didn't know why. Maybe to prove to herself it was just stress. The hallway lights were dimmed. The polished floor reflected her movement. Halfway down, she heard the footsteps once more. Measured, precise, behind her. This time she didn't stop. She kept walking. The footsteps matched her pace exactly. Not slower, not faster, perfectly aligned. She reached the midpoint of the corridor where the motion sensor lights had flickered before. They remained dark until something stepped between them. The lights ahead of her blinked on. One, then the next, then the next. Moving toward her. Marissa felt her breath shorten. The footsteps were no longer behind her. They were in front, coming closer. She could hear the faint drag of a shoe across tile. The corridor was empty. Completely. Yet the lights continued activating in a steady rhythm, closing the distance between them. 5 fixtures away. 4, 3, 2. The final light above her head snapped on. Marissa did not see anyone, but she felt something pass her left shoulder, a displacement of air. Cold. Intentional. Behind her, the lights began switching off again. One by one, as if whatever had walked toward her was now walking away. Marissa gripped the edge of the linen cart as she stepped into the dimly lit corridor of the older wing once more. The night had grown colder. The vents overhead emitted a sharper, almost biting draft, and the antiseptic smell seemed to have thinned, leaving behind a faint trace of something stale, like old hospital linens left too long in storage. Her pulse hammered in her ears, louder than the usual hum of the fluorescent lights, and every creak of the polished tile beneath her shoes sounded magnified, echoing in the emptiness. She had checked and double-checked the schedule. All the staff were accounted for, most on break or working in rooms far from her path. And yet the feeling persisted, that she was being followed. Footsteps, slow, measured, precise, never a misstep, always just behind, but never visible. She had tried turning suddenly, swinging around corners, stopping abruptly, but every time the corridor lay empty. Only the faint displacement of air brushed past her shoulder, chilling her skin, confirming the presence of something unseen. Marissa paused at the halfway point, where the motion sensor lights had flickered the night before. She could feel the pressure in her chest tighten, her breath shallow. The corridor ahead stretched darkly, corners obscured by shadows that seemed too deep for the light to reach. And then she heard it again, the precise, deliberate drag of a shoe, moving in perfect rhythm with her own pace. She stopped entirely. Silence. But the lights ahead flickered sequentially, snapping on and off as though someone or something was approaching, pacing just beyond the edge of her vision. 5 fixtures away. 4, 3, 2, 1. Snap. The final light blazed above her head. She saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet the sensation of being observed intensified. A faint displacement of air brushed against her left arm, cold, intentional. Her skin prickled. She knew that presence wasn't human, not entirely. The hair on her neck stood on end, goosebumps crawling over her arms. She wanted to turn and run, but her legs felt heavier than they should, as though the tiles themselves were resisting her movements. Taking a tentative step forward, she glanced down the corridor. The far exit door, normally a dull gray, seemed darker somehow, almost viscous in the low light. Her reflection in the small security panel flashed intermittently, fragmented, shifting, not quite matching her movements. She blinked rapidly, shook her head, thinking fatigue had finally taken its toll. Night shifts were long. She had been here too many consecutive nights, but deep down she knew this wasn't exhaustion. She rounded the corner near the radiology suite. The lights flickered once more, and then she heard it. A whisper, almost too soft to be discernible, seeming to slither along the walls. Marissa. Her breath caught. She spun toward the sound. Empty hallway. No one. The vents were still humming mechanically. No voices, no footsteps. Her heart pounded, echoing in her ears. She felt trapped between disbelief and terror, unable to ignore the unmistakable sense of awareness that something unseen was following, studying, learning. Determined to keep moving, she pressed on, weaving past supply closets and empty patient rooms. Each door was closed, yet the cold air brushing against her seemed to emanate from all directions. Occasionally, she thought she saw shadows at the corners of her vision, flickers that vanished the instant she looked directly. A door swung slightly, as though nudged by a hand too light for a human grip. She swallowed hard and pressed onward. Approaching the stairwell to the basement, she hesitated. The old hospital records had been moved there earlier in the week for an audit. Everything should be empty. Everything should be quiet. The door before her groaned as she nudged it open. Darkness swallowed the steps. She switched on her phone flashlight. The beam trembled in her hand, illuminating peeling paint on the walls and the scuffed metal railings. Every step downward seemed amplified, each metallic squeak echoing infinitely. Halfway down, she froze. Footsteps. Again. Slow. Measured. But this time they weren't behind her. They were moving beside her at the same pace. She swept the flashlight around. Shadows shifted in the corners. Boxes of old patient files, yellowed and brittle, seemed to lean slightly askew, as if pushed by something invisible. Her throat tightened. The temperature had dropped noticeably, breath fogged faintly in front of her face. A soft scraping sound echoed from the far corner of the basement. Marissa's fingers tightened around the cart. The fluorescent strip light overhead buzzed, then dimmed intermittently. The air grew heavier, charged, like a static current crawling across her skin. And then she saw her, the same gray-haired woman from the waiting room and lower-level corridor. Marissa's blood ran cold. She wasn't moving toward her. She stood just at the corner, head tilted, eyes unfocused, silent. The visitor badge gleamed faintly under the broken light. The woman's lips moved. No sound emerged. Marissa's pulse thundered in her ears. Her instincts screamed at her to back away, but curiosity, fear, and disbelief compelled her to step closer. "Ma'am," she was, voice shaking, "this area isn't open to visitors." The woman's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to pierce through her. She whispered again, inaudible but heavy, as though the words were carried through the air itself. For him. Marissa stumbled backward, nearly colliding with the cart. The overhead lights flickered violently, shadows dancing like living tendrils across the floor. A cold wind swept through the basement, carrying the faint metallic scent of old hospital beds and unwashed sheets. The whispers continued, unintelligible fragments layered over her own heartbeat. The cart wheels squeaked again, though she hadn't moved them. Boxes rattled on the shelves. The fluorescent lights pulsed, flicker, pause, flicker, in a rhythm too deliberate to be coincidence. The woman stepped closer, but her feet made no sound. Air pressure shifted against Marissa's chest, and then she realized the footsteps, the lights, the whispers. They weren't random. They were aligning, marking her movements. Every turn she took, every step she made was being mirrored, studied, anticipated. She was no longer walking alone. The hospital itself had become a silent predator. Marissa swallowed hard, glancing toward the basement exit stairwell. The elevator was inactive, the call button blinking faintly. Somewhere far above, a machine beeped rhythmically, oddly punctuating the unnatural rhythm around her. She took another step, and the shadows shifted again, almost forming shapes, fleeting but distinctly humanoid. A sudden clang echoed from the far corner. Marissa froze, flashlight trembling. Boxes toppled over in a chain reaction, revealing nothing. Empty floor, no figure, no chair, nothing. And yet the air felt heavy, oppressive, charged with anticipation. Her lungs burned as she tried to breathe normally. The weight of invisible eyes pressed down on her from every angle. A whisper of movement brushed her hair, the same cold brush along her shoulder as before. The lights overhead snapped off entirely, plunging the basement into near darkness, save for the weak circle of her phone flashlight. The last thing Marissa saw before the battery began to die was the faint outline of the gray-haired woman, or perhaps a collection of shadows, stepping forward from the darkness, head tilted, hands folded neatly in front, eyes fixed on her. And then a soft, chilling sound, almost like a sigh, reverberated around the basement walls. I'm still waiting. Marissa stumbled back, heart pounding, breath shallow, realizing that whatever she was witnessing, it wasn't confined to the night. It would be waiting. Always. And she was only beginning to see it.